Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun, Dai here, and after far too long, it's finally time for me to cover the lore of the adventures of Lord el-melloi II. I do wish that name were shorter though, it's a friggin' mouthful. Anyway, these novels are the sequel to el-melloi Case Files, which covered what our pal Waver was up to while the Fifth Grail War was going on. He never got his chance to participate, but he did get to see Skandar, which is cool. Special thanks to Az, Fearboss, and Narmbo on Beastslayer for translating these. Before we get started, consider buying this Dai-chan Dakimakura from Cuddly Octopus. Celebrate your fandom with the most huggable merch around. It's spicy, so I can't provide a direct link, but you can easily just search it on Google. Without further ado, let's dive into Volume 1, The Devourer of Gods. The novel's prologue takes us to the Strait of Malacca, where a pirate named Yarg prepares to sail off with a crew of motorboats. Mind you, these are modern pirates, not the kind you'd expect from the Age of Discovery. No Jack Sparrow here. Yarg claims to be from the Cafe, an underground casino at Batum Island where criminals gather. They've been hired for their skills as a spellcaster, specifically their ability for enhancement. While the rest of the crew is none the wiser, Yarg's client is also a mage. Said client is aiming to kidnap someone named the Consultant. In just a year's time, the Consultant has gathered most of the local gangs into his own empire, and is using them to fish up treasure from a sunken ship. Normally, the Consultant is hidden and untouchable, leading to suspicion that he's also a mage. In response, the Clock Tower has sent an agent to Singapore to stop the Consultant from exposing magecraft to the world. This agent happens to be known as the Plunderer. Yarg's client wants to nab the Consultant before the Clock Tower does, to hold them ransom for some easy cash. The two of them discuss the size and influence of the Clock Tower before bringing up the Manor, a rival organization in the Far East. Both groups use magic circuits for their craft, but are still fundamentally different. It's an offhand reference that will be important later. For now, Yarg and their client plan to take a crew of pirates to ambush the Consultant. They want to steer clear of the Plunderer, as he's a mage who destroys other people's magecraft and claims it is his own. Right on cue, two of the motorboats explode, and the Plunderer walks out from the nearby mangroves. He drugged the other pirates ahead of time, so they'd remain asleep during his assault. While Yarg's client had been gathering information, it seems the Plunderer was already on his tail. To fight back, the client whips out his mystic code, the shrunken head of a woman. This monster, a Penangalan, flew at the Plunderer and tried to bite his shoulder. Apparently, this is some kind of necromancy, one that originated from Asia but has been degraded by Western colonialism. In other words, cultural exchange can harm magecraft if you lose track of its heritage. That must be why Reen, a Japanese mage, still recites a lot of her spells in German. The client supplements his spells by firing rifle shots coated with the lingering resentment of death. In a shocking twist, though, Yarg steps up and blocks the shots using a laughing box in a cage. That's right, the big reveal is that Yarg is actually Gray, and the Plunderer is Waver. With the help of a pendant, Gray staves off curses from the client's severed heads, and slices through his rifle with her scythe. Her pendant then turns into a sun hat, which she wears to hide her face. So that's it. Gray and Waver are the ones pursuing the Consultant, and they swindled a group of pirates for their next lead. Chapter 1 takes us back in time a little bit, with the two of them walking through Singapore in the blazing heat. Waver's still as mediocre as always. A talented mage could just adjust their own temperature, but he's stuck wiping sweat from his face. The alias of Plunderer is more intimidating than he can possibly be in person. Drawn in by a delightful aroma, they stop to eat at a food court, or hawker center. Just like the variety of dishes on sale, Singapore serves as a melting pot of different types of magecraft. Waver recently attended a conference to familiarize himself with the types of spells he could encounter. Mainly, it's a mix of colonial Western magecraft, Asian thought magecraft, and Middle Eastern curses. Turns out, pirates and magecraft tend to accompany each other, as surviving out on the hostile seas leads pirates to follow their own rules and beliefs. In that regard, they're more likely to cling to mystery than the rest of modern society. The music playing throughout the food court stops, being replaced by a wayang performance. This Singaporean variant of Chinese opera happens to involve a single gymnastic performer dancing between the stalls, single-handedly portraying a battle. One of the characters being portrayed is Sun Wukong from Journey to the West. The actor ends their show by tossing Gray a flower. It's captivating, and Gray is glad to see Waver enjoying himself. He's been troubled, going back and forth about wanting to quit teaching. Apparently, his department is now self-sustaining, and he'd like to focus on his own craft. Waver's been waiting in the food court to meet with someone he consulted via email. When they don't show up, he notices that Gray's flower has a message attached to it. The note says his acquaintance is a fake, and that one of his students has been kidnapped by pirates. It instructs him to find the consultant, which leads into what we saw in the prologue. Chapter 2, then, resumes their search for the consultant. They learned where the consultant's base was from those pirates earlier, and now they're sneaking into a small island fishing village. It's designed to be abandoned on short notice, which is probably how the consultant has gotten away so far. Waver opens a test tube of cold, sticky fluid, casting an invisibility spell. It's useless against a mage, since it doesn't conceal mana, but it should help for everything else. Oddly enough, most of the island's inhabitants seem to be young children, far younger than the average pirate. Waver and Gray accidentally wander into a bounded field that sounds an alarm. Kids with pistols, rifles, and rocket launchers approach them. Gray uses a burst of wind, leaping into the air to gain distance from the enemy. She's taken by surprise when a scarved assassin hits her with an elbow strike. It's the consultant, who then chants Anfang before firing a magic bullet. These bullets remind Gray of Luvia, and not wanting to go easy, she swings down with her scythe and nearly kills the consultant. At the last second, a young man with long hair steps in and freezes Gray mid-air with some sort of spell. Only then does the consultant remove their scarf, revealing herself to be none other than Rin Tosaka. She recognizes Waver and wonders why the hell he infiltrated her base. Man, I knew she was aggressive, but is she really the one arming a bunch of children? Rin introduces Waver to Ergo, the young man who just saved her life. There's been a clear time skip between case files and now, by a few years, because we never actually saw Rin in Waver's class before. Yet now, the two are clearly mentor and pupil by this point. Rin apparently applied for summer vacation to visit the Strait of Malacca for some pirate hijinks. Waver then assumes she's the kidnapped student, and that the note they read was inaccurate. With introductions out of the way, Rin orders the kids to get back to work and invites Waver and Gray inside a crudely furnished building. Waver grills Rin on her activities. While she swears she hasn't been breaking the concealment of mystery, she has been trying to hide her activities from the clock tower. Her best defense is that the kids are superstitious and don't really think too much about her spells. Yikes, she'd be in trouble if a different mage found out. So here Rin is, giving information on sunken treasure to pirates in exchange for their help excavating. She's good with business, which helped her out in school. Given all the property damage she and Luvia caused fighting each other, she needed to contribute to the repair costs with published papers. That said, she's given a bit too much leniency for having an affinity for 5 elements. Rin cuts to the chase, admitting that she's trying to salvage the sunken ship of Zheng He, a Chinese mariner whose fleet was so massive it resembled a moving country. Supposedly, his treasures from the Ming Dynasty can be found underwater. Given such treasure could include mage artifacts, Rin was hoping to keep it a secret and reap all the rewards. In the process, however, she found this man Ergo stranded atop a wooden board at sea. He's an amnesiac whom Rin named Ergo since he was mumbling it while unconscious. This reminds Waver of the phrase, "I think, therefore I am," which winds up being important later. Clearly, Ergo's special, revealing his ability to manifest 6 luminescent arms from his back. Uh-oh, is this guy from Elfin Lied? Well, that explains how he was able to restrain Gray earlier. These phantasmal limbs are a complete mystery to Rin, and Waver even likens them to something from the Age of Gods. Even though Ergo lacks his memory prior to Rin rescuing him, he's already learned several languages just by conversing with the people in Singapore. In about half a day, he was already speaking English. He also always feels hungry, even though Rin's been feeding him. In fact, his only memory is of eating something mysterious that was sweet, bitter, and sour all at the same time. Intrigued, Waver asks to stay for a while. At the same time, somewhere deep beneath the sea, a pale, bone-like giant roams the sand, commanded by an ominous voice that refers to it as Tangier. The giant comes across a metallic incubator with a coat of arms adorning it. Its contents are empty, however, so Tangier vanishes from sight on command. Back to the island, Rin spars with Ergo, launching a barrage of curses that are easily deflected by Ergo's translucent arms. Even with her enhanced martial arts, she struggles to push her opponent back. Eventually, though, she lures him into a trap, unleashing chains of darkness from the ground to tie his arms up. In response, Waver coaches Ergo on how to control his power. After Waver reveals that Rin's chains are illusory shadows, Ergo stops overthinking his predicament and instinctively slips out of their grasp. Waver calls off the match when Rin resorts to using her gems. He's already seen enough of that destruction from her fights with Luvia. They were hoping that this training might help bring out Ergo's memories, but to no avail. Back at base, Ergo falls asleep while one of the pirate girls cuts his hair. The kids being rowdy doesn't bother him at all. Rin mentions he's pretty much always sleeping, so they don't get much time to talk. The pirates dine on fruit they grew nearby. Since mangrove swamps aren't good for fruit trees, Rin used magecraft to alter the soil. This is one of the things Rin offers to these kids to earn their trust. They're not exactly trained professionals, instead being abandoned, but Rin puts value in their bond. Like a total tsundere, she claims she's not recruiting them out of the goodness of her heart, even though that's exactly what's happening, minus the guns, of course. I guess that's just the rough environment they live in. Waver brings up Shiro, who is currently serving as Luvia's butler at the clock tower. He assumes Shiro and Rin are dating, but she quickly denies it. It's worth noting that from here on out, the author is using a mix of various routes. Events seem to happen roughly like they do in Unlimited Blade Works, but without Shiro and Rin falling in love. Essentially, this is yet another alternate timeline. Rin abducts Gray for a bit, wanting to talk to the adorable secret student of the el-melloi classroom. More specifically, Rin notices that Gray looks familiar and reveals how she participated in the Fifth Grail War and met Artoria there. After taking a good look at Gray's face, Rin correctly assumes that she doesn't age. Just like King Arthur, Gray maintains the appearance of a 15-year-old, even though she's an adult. Gray suspects Waver might want to quit teaching so that he can better research a cure for her condition. Ergo's new haircut is much shorter now, reminding Waver of a different redhead. Waver's been teaching Ergo a special kind of meditation, Gachi Rinkan or Kangetsuho, that involves imagining the moon at different sizes in order to grasp the entire universe. Since the bodhisattvas are depicted with multiple arms, Waver figured this technique would suit Ergo's translucent ones. For as thankful as Ergo is for everyone's kindness, he's actually afraid to learn about his past. Perhaps he killed someone and doesn't deserve the affection. Their conversation is interrupted when he freezes up, sensing something calling out to him. From the ocean, Waver notices a pile of bones emerge and take the form of massive animals, such as a bird, wolf, and spider. They quickly step aside for their master, the bone giant from earlier. It speaks, commanding Waver to hand over Ergo in the name of the Atlas Institute. Waver tries to ask for clarification, but is refused. Without a better explanation, though, Waver steps up to defend Ergo as his new student, using his cigar to create a dense smokescreen. He and Ergo try to flee, but the giant can still attack. Oddly, it takes relief in how Ergo's arms are able to deflect its strikes. A moment later, Rin provides backup from the ocean, riding in on a motorboat and firing off her gundo shots. On the other end of the beach, Gray launches a surprise attack from the trees and retrieves Waver. According to Waver, these bone familiars aren't the work of curses or the undead, like you might see with Medea's dragon-tooth warriors. Instead, they are the result of Atlas alchemy, using a complex algorithm to animate the bones. Gray and Ergo team up to launch a coordinated assault. Before going on the offensive, Ergo mentions that he feels hungry whenever Gray's around. He uses his arms to crush the weaker familiars, giving Gray the chance to smash the giant with her battering ram. It's not enough to destroy the giant, but her attack does launch it into the water, where Reen is waiting for a second strike. Upon activating her magic crest, she blasts the giant, only to find it still standing. She remarks the damn thing's stronger than Heracles, or at least one of his lives. Waver watches the giant regenerate and realizes it's merely a puppet being controlled by someone else. Before he can warn them, white chains erupt from the sand, subduing Gray, Ergo, and Reen all at once. On the verge of getting crushed by these chains, Gray begins to unleash Rongo Minyad, only to be stopped by a new voice. An androgynous woman with blue hair declares her presence while holding a bone sword to Waver's throat. She introduces herself as Latio Crudelis Hiram. The Crudelis family happens to be one of the 6 sources of Atlas. They're like the equivalent of the Clock Tower Lords. Not wanting to test the power of Gray's lance, Latio instead opts to negotiate, so she and Gray put down their weapons. Even though Gray deactivates Ad, its light sends Ergo into a fit of madness. Against his will, he is consumed by a desire to devour. He begs Latio not to let him go, but winds up shattering the chains on his own. As he screams to stop himself, his arms reach out to attack Latio, before getting caught up in another set of chains. The giant Tangier, the chains, and even the familiars are all made from Latio's own bone tissue. This lets her treat them as an extension of her own body, an exoform. Tangier's separate personality developed from one of Latio's thought partitions. She then declares that Ergo is an ancient inheritance that she's entitled to. Long ago, 3 mages of different organizations conducted an experiment that has now escaped. While she doesn't explain the ritual that created his arms, Waver more or less figures it out on his own. He recalls 2 different legends, Yomotsu Hegui and Persephone, tales of gaining power by eating magical food. Persephone, for instance, was condemned to the underworld for as long as she ate Hades' food. Supposedly, she ate a pomegranate, which symbolizes human flesh from the land of the dead. He suspects the food Ergo remembers eating was the flesh and blood of gods, 3 of them to account for 3 pairs of arms. Only the issue is, a human shouldn't be able to contain a god's power, let alone 3 of them. Latio refuses to elaborate, but offers any compensation in exchange for her inheritance. In his current state, Ergo thinks he should just go with her, but Waver wants him to make a proper decision, to truly follow his heart. Just when negotiations have fallen apart, they are all interrupted by another voice coming from a hawk that Latio refers to as Mushiki. In the blink of an eye, the hawk descends, and half of Ergo's head is shaved off, spraying blood onto the beach. A phantom hand made of light then emerges from his back. With these arms out of control, Ergo destroys the island's shore, leaving behind the crater of a giant hand. Needless to say, the blast causes Gray to lose consciousness. As an interlude, it seems Waver left for Singapore without permission, only sending Rhinus a letter of apology. She's angry when this letter arrives, and vents her frustration with Luvia. They notice Reen had also gone to Singapore for the summer, leaving Shiro behind to get used to living in London. During this time, Luvia hopes to lure her beloved Shero away from Reen. As rivals, Luvia and Reen once jumped off the Tower of London, being nicknamed the Mary and Poppins of July, respectively. Flat interrupts their conversation and gets into a fight with Luvia. Their slapstick routine gets the attention of the other students, leaving Rhinus to worry about Gray's well-being. She too knows that Gray hasn't been aging, and imagines Waver's doing something crazy to help her out. Knocked unconscious, Gray experiences a strange dream in which her senses align with Ergo's. In it, 3 figures descend upon and deem him a failure. She then wakes up to find herself with Waver and Ergo in a building belonging to the clock tower's Singapore branch. Before the disaster, Reen was able to evacuate the pirate children, and bizarrely, Ergo's severed head is completely healed. Waver tries to make sense of all of this. Perhaps Ergo's missing memories aren't missing at all. Rather, having 3 gods worth of memories is far too much for a human to comprehend. For it all to fit into his mortal brain, those memories must be so compressed that he can't access them, like a super dense zip folder. Either way, Waver assumes that the gods within Ergo are slowly killing him and erasing his identity. For as much as Ergo enjoyed his simple life playing with the pirate children, now that there are people hunting him down, he decides he wants to try and survive. Thus, it's time for Waver and his students to go on the offensive. Outside, on Shenton Way, Waver makes contact with Reen and the Singapore branch's manager Chris, a muscular man in a British suit. Chris hands Waver a briefcase before taking his leave. The group then heads to Chinatown, and Reen rings a bell, causing a large building to appear that was originally concealed through Feng Shui. It is the Spiral Manor, home to one of 2 organizations for philosophy magecraft. I already have a separate lesson on philosophy magecraft, otherwise known as thought magecraft, but basically, it's a Taoist style of magecraft practiced throughout Asia. Rather than magic crests, these mages pass down philosophy keys, which can access the power of a philosophy foundation created by immortal Xian from the Age of Gods. The Xian are a race of immortal sages who exist on par with true ancestors. They were born from the planet and have constructed their philosophy foundation as a simulation of the world shaped into a disc. We don't usually see Xian in the Nasuverse, but a good example is Yume Ren, an incarnated elemental known as a Genren. Inheriting a philosophy key is akin to bearing the burden of part of the world in exchange for performing Xian arts. Our buddy Tai Gong Wang is the best example of someone who can harness the Xian spells. Rather than reach the root, practitioners of philosophy magecraft instead hope to improve the philosophy foundation so that it matches the root's accuracy. Genren usually don't concern themselves with mortals, but the Spiral Manor does. Normally, since they operate in such different ways, Western and philosophy mages steer clear of one another, but in this case, Waver has some business with the organization. A middle-aged woman named Tao comes out to greet him and hands him a small wooden box. With both this box and the briefcase from earlier, Waver leads the group to Singapore's subway system. With a spell, he creates an opening in the wall that can be walked through like at the train station in Harry Potter. On the other side is a long corridor lined with locked doors. From the briefcase, he removes a golden key, and from the wooden box, a silver one. These are used to open a more ancient-looking door that leads to a metallic room with a strange sphere in the middle. It's a mystic code, the observational sphere Lux Carta. I'm pretty sure we discussed this in a prior video, but the Mages Association relies on patents for much of its income. If a given mage wants to use a patented formula, they've got to pay a small fee. Given how secretive mages are, though, how could they possibly keep track of which spells get used? Essentially, the clock tower has observational devices that monitor the spells used around the world. To access the device in Singapore, Waver needed permission from both the clock tower and Spiral Manor. He wants to use Lux Carta to track Latio's bone magecraft. Since she uses her own bone matter in the process, it should emit a consistent wavelength that they can trace. Reen finds this suspicious, and is outraged to hear that Waver got permission to use this device by claiming he thought his own patent was being violated. In other words, he's committing fraud because it's the quickest option available. Either way, with Reen helping to tune the device, Waver is able to map out where Latio's been operating. Nice. At the same time, Latio herself is waiting in an abandoned construction zone to meet up with Mushiki, the hawk from before. They discuss Ergo's recent tirade and consider it to be a successful test of his abilities. Mushiki warns that Latio's hideout on Sentosa Island has been discovered. That means she only has one base left that Waver hasn't found. The hawk then transforms into a woman who has a tattoo running from her throat to her cheek. She's like a silver flame who wears gold armbands. Mushiki threateningly demands that Latio hand over Ergo. While the Crudelis family does have first dibs, there's nothing stopping Latio from abandoning her claim. In terms of succession, Mushiki is second in line. It's also revealed through dialogue that Mushiki is one of the original creators of the Philosophy Foundation. In other words, an immortal Xian from ancient times. Regardless, Latio refuses, confident that she can take on Waver should he show up. Waver's group now resides in an apartment provided by the clock tower. While Gray and Ergo talk up on the building's roof, Reen uses the basement to create more of her jewels. Waver coaches her as she drops her own blood onto them, transferring her power into each. Reen is used to doing this for herself, but in this case, she's preparing a set of jewels for Waver to use against Latio. After a successful batch, the two relax with some Chinese tea. Reen's fully committed to this adventure and warns Waver not to leave her out of it. The next day, Waver's crew plans to capture Latio by assaulting her position. He asks Reen to gather the pirate children for additional support. Ergo bravely accepts being used as bait so that, in the long run, he can continue living. Reen and her pirates ride 7 motorboats to Latio's second stronghold out in the middle of nowhere. As they get closer, a heavy fog envelops them, and Latio's voice calls out, still demanding they hand over Ergo. From the fog, a massive ghost ship comes into view, which Reen believes to be the ship from Zheng He's fleet she was searching for. Before their eyes, it repairs itself with the same bone matter that makes up Latio's familiars. Reen gets pissed off, calling Latio a thief for claiming her treasure. As she rants, the ghost ship fires its cannons, releasing rockets upon the motorboats. Given how strong the bone giant was, it's assumed that the pirates' weapons would be totally useless, so Reen orders a retreat. One of the explosions causes the steering column of Reen's boat to separate. When Reen starts to panic, Waver grabs the wheel, jams it back in, and resumes control of the boat. Even then, however, their steering is so unstable that another of the pirates' boats docks alongside theirs for support. Latio, who can easily calculate the future with thought partition, lures their motorboat in for a volley of rockets. This forces the crew to fight back with Gray's lance. Tangier, the bone giant, warns Latio of the incoming noble phantasm, to which she bolsters the ship for defense. Reen recognizes the light of Rongo-Minyad as being extremely similar to Excalibur. Its blast tears Zheng He's ship in half, vaporizing most of it. No longer able to sail properly, the ship remains dormant long enough for Ergo to pull Waver's group on board. Latio responds by conjuring more bone creatures, but luckily Gray's still in the fight. Activating the lance used to shut down Ad for a while, but his endurance has improved. That said, since the ship is made of bone, the crew's basically hopped right into the lion's den. Regardless, Waver has a plan, calling on Reen to leap from the ship's mast and unleash the jewel they created earlier. She recites an incantation that causes all of the bones to freeze up. Together, Waver and Reen have just performed magical hacking. If you can determine a spell's frequency, talented mages can match that wavelength to interfere with it. Reen's compatibility with the 5 elements, mixed with Waver's analysis from Lux Carta, create the perfect opportunity to sabotage Latio's familiars. Having earned the upper hand, Waver asks if it's possible to prevent Ergo's memory from being saturated, and Latio answers it can be done by returning the gods. It was never part of the plan, but the gods he devoured can be restored to their original state. This gives Ergo a momentary relief, but it gets interrupted when Mushiki descends from above. With the power of a typhoon, Mushiki clears the ship's mangled deck and takes on her human form. Waver suspects that she is the second of the 3 mages that made Ergo devour gods. The first must be one of Latio's ancestors from the Crudelis family. Now that Latio has failed to capture Ergo, Mushiki believes it's now her turn to claim the inheritance. In defiance, Latio strikes back with her bone sword, but is deflected each time. Even Tangier, who's regained movement, can't seem to match Mushiki's unarmed might. Mockingly, Mushiki questions why, after over 2,000 years, the Crudelis family hasn't once attained the strength of warriors like Xiang Yu or Yume Ren. With chains extending from the gold bands on her arms, she grabs and slams Tangier and Ergo into the deck. With just a single thumb, Mushiki deflects Reen's volley of rubies and sends her crashing into the mast. The difference in power is so obvious that Waver realizes they're fighting a Xian from the Age of Gods. Technically, however, Mushiki states that she's no longer one of the 10 court Xian from back then. Anyway, she approaches Ergo and orders him to devour Gray. Being so damn hungry, the presence of Gray's lance must have driven him crazy. After all, Ad contains the spirit of a hero, Sir Kay of the Round Table. There was no greater meal in sight for someone who dined on gods. Resisting the temptation, though, Ergo instead chomps down onto his own arm, spattering the ship in blood. Waver runs in to offer guidance, reminding Ergo of his training. Visualizing the moon can also help him remain calm in this situation. Then, Waver wonders why Latio and Mushiki are fighting each other. They must have different goals, and Mushiki clarifies this by stating she wants to eat Ergo. It's like a pecking order. If he's powerful for eating gods, she'll become even more powerful from eating him. Waver refuses to let his newest student be treated that way, and begs Latio to help out. Right now, they have a common foe. In agreement, Latio uses her thought partition to instruct Gray on how to evade Mushiki's attacks. This buys Waver time to give Ergo a one-on-one lesson on gods. He lectures on the meaning of the ocean and hands with regard to divine legends. Normally, this wouldn't be near enough to narrow down the 3 gods Ergo devoured, but luckily one of them is much more obvious. Tales of King Yu the Great describe an invincible monster who conjures storms. King Yu finally captured the beast by binding it with special chains with gold bells attached to them. That description closely matches Mushiki, or rather her name's Chinese equivalent, Wujichi. It just so happens that the legend of Wujichi served as the prototype to a more famous Chinese figure. Before Waver can reveal this god, Ergo shouts its name, Sun Wukong, otherwise known as the Monkey King Sun Shinje. This awakens the god within Ergo, allowing him to fight Mushiki all by himself. He calls upon Sun Wukong's noble phantasm, the staff known as Ruyi Jingu Bang, transforming 2 of his translucent limbs into massive, divine arms that shatter through Mushiki's chains. Just like the staff, these arms transform to their user's will, which Ergo uses to turn them into a drill of sorts. Similar to Rongo Miniad, Wukong's staff was originally meant to secure the sea in place and bind the world together. Like some kinda crazy Gurren Lagann shit, the arms tear open a hole in the sky. A rift in space that sucks Mushiki in before closing. This doesn't kill Mushiki, but Waver suspects it'll keep her at bay for some time. Despite her strength, her techniques were unpolished and basic, leading him to think that she's still under the restriction of the gold bands from King Yu. Honoring their temporary truce, Latio takes Tangier and flees into the ocean with a warning that they'll meet again. Before that, however, Waver wants Ergo to return the gods he devoured. Waver's got an idea on how, but first, they need to identify the other 2 gods. The ghost ship begins to collapse, and Reen freaks out since she hasn't gotten the chance to search it for treasure. She desperately runs into the ship's hull as it sinks beneath the sea. The novel's epilogue has Waver, Gray, Reen, and Ergo waiting for their flight at the airport. They were detained at Singapore's Clock Tower branch for a while to explain themselves, and luckily, none of them revealed how Waver made fraudulent use of Luke's Carta. While Reen and Gray look for souvenirs to bring back for the classroom, Ergo worries about his future. He finds it odd how Waver welcomes him, despite wanting to devour Gray earlier. I guess he could have been after Arthur or Sir Kay. Neither of them are divine, after all. Regardless, Waver is confident Ergo can overcome his temptation. Being more productive, Waver recalls how the actor he met in town at the start had given him an important clue. He doesn't know who that actor was, but he does request an investigation from the clock tower. The pirate children call Waver's cell phone and use it to say their goodbyes to Ergo. Next up, our group is headed for Tokyo, where Waver thinks the gods can be returned. The scene then shifts to Japan, with quite the special cameo. Mikiya Kokuto from Kara no Kyokai sits beneath the moon with his daughter Mana. Technically, his name is now Mikiya Ryogi, since Shiki's family is far more influential. His new name is addressed in a letter from Toko Aozaki, which I assume will spark a whole new adventure. For as exciting as that is, I regret to inform that Az has yet to fully translate the next volume, and I'm at their mercy when it comes to actually reading the series. I'll have to focus on other Type Moon goods in the meantime. Rest assured, I have every intention of picking these videos back up as soon as I can. For now, what did you think about seeing Rin again as an adult? It's kinda weird, knowing this is a platonic route for her. Still, I hope you enjoyed this dive into Volume 1, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching!
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all our anime lore, discussions, and Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or a YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like spicy exclusive vids and early access.
As always, celebrate your fandom! I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Omagoden, Freebrick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Zamas Autonomous, Scout, Yuki Eidos, Crow Kalem, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Meifu Mado, Caitlin P, Sogai CH, Vladimirovna, The Taz 96, Jonathan Padua, Kengo X77, Hersha of E-Rated Hands, Alistair Bernadotte, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.